Hi, I'm Stephen Thrasher, and I'm an inventor and entrepreneur in Dallas, Texas. And I've been in patent practice for over 10 years, and today I'm the founder of the Invention Factory, where we help inventors and entrepreneurs like you understand and protect your inventions so you can save months of frustration and save thousands of dollars and get your products to market fast. Today I saw a post by Jenna Bake. Jenna asked basically how much does it cost to get a utility patent application, and I saw some responses by some of you in the comment section. Tanya said that she thought it would cost about $1,500 to get a patent application prepared. Amy said about $5,000, and I saw a post by Jim who said it would be about $10,000 to get a patent application filed. Well, what I want to do is show you from a perspective I've learned by preparing hundreds of patent applications and training over a dozen patent attorneys and technical writers and patent agents to prepare and file patent applications, and give you some of the guidelines we look to try to figure out how much to charge for a patent application, so then you can see what goes into figuring this all out. I'm going to cover some assumptions and factors that influence the cost of getting your patent application filed. And then at the end we're going to cover some hints so that you can get your application prepared less expensively and more professionally. The first thing I want to cover are some of the assumptions that we're going to have for just this brief discussion. Assumption number one is that you're looking for a patent application for a single invention rather than a product. One of the big mistakes that an inventor will make is they will come to a patent attorney or patent agent and they'll be seeking advice on how to protect a product that they have rather than focusing on the invention that they want to protect, or if it has more than one invention, recognizing that each separate invention brings with it its own challenges. And of course, if a particular product incorporates more than one invention, that means it's going to have more than one patent application, and that's going to increase the cost. The second thing that we're going to assume is that you're not bringing a rush case to a patent attorney. The third assumption is that the invention is clear, that you or someone else has come in and has done what's called prior art search. In other words, you know what's out there and what's been out there before. You have a historical perspective that you bring to your invention. We're also going to assume that the invention is identified. One of the challenges that patent attorneys face that will drive up the cost of a patent and or drive up the hours involved in a patent application preparation is when the attorney has to kind of act like a detective and go out and try to figure out what about this product is unique and where does it fit into a market, and that search process takes time. The fourth assumption is that the invention that you come in with is static. No changing the invention. If you come in with one idea and an attorney looks at it, or when I say attorney, of course I in this case mean a tech writer or a patent agent as well, but when we look at an idea and prepare a cost estimate, we're doing it for that invention. If you come in with a product that solves a similar problem a week from then or a month from then, and it has different features and it's structured differently, that's a different invention. Let's get into the details of the cost. The cost of a patent application is largely influenced by the technology area of that patent application. For example, mechanical, electrical, software. We can talk about other processes. This would include things like games, even board games or video games. Here is just some real quick baseline rules of thumb, and these are all triggered off of when we meet, say on a Monday morning, and go over what we think is going to be written that week. when we're estimating a price and we give a price estimate or a fixed fee rate, which we'll discuss here in a second as well, we base this off the figures and tables. And when I say figures and tables, I mean the number of figures and or the number of tables. And this could, simple tables kind of don't apply here, so we're going to talk about more complex tables. And by the way, with your invention, you do want tables for reasons that are beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But for a simple mechanical device, and by simple I mean something with one or fewer moving parts, or some structure that has an application in the real world, you can look at those as roughly $1,000 per figure and table. So if your patent application ends up having 5 drawings, you could bet it's going to be about a $5,000 application. If the mechanical device is complex, if your mechanical invention is complex, and by complex I mean it has more than one moving set of parts, the complexities create layers that have to be described and interconnected, and so the discussion expands almost geometrically. But what we do is we estimate the cost of something that's complex per figure at about 50% more. So when you get into the electrical area, some simple electrical circuits we will estimate at about $1,250 per figure, $1,250. And if things get complex, that will drive that up about an additional 50% per figure. Software, simple software starts at about $1,500 per figure, and those are typically going to be architecture descriptions and flowcharts. But I should say that part of what drives this cost is actually the complexity of the claim sets that go along with the application itself. So, by the way, if you don't know what a claim is, leave a comment down below and we'll go over parts of a patent application in the future. And then other processes, I mentioned board games earlier, those are kind of all over the place. We got to actually look at what the game is. But those can run between $1,000 and $1,500, again, per figure or per table. So if you're talking about something with 5 figures, then you're looking at somewhere between $5,000 and $7,500 as your baseline cost for the process. You can see your application fees as low as $400. Larger companies will end up paying as much as $2,000. Also, you have the actual cost of the drawings, which for a simple figure could be as low as $75. For a complex figure, as much as $150. So let's go back, about 10,000 years. And we're sitting around a campfire, and we have this thing called a mug. And we use it to pour our liquid in, but when we pour our liquid in it and pull it off the campfire, it's kind of hot sometimes, and it burns our fingers. And so our friend Ugg over there came up with this really cool idea. It's a handle. So you hold it, keeps you from burning your fingers and stuff. And no one's ever seen this handle before, and it's just, ooh, it's so cool, you know. And so he wants to get a patent on this particular device. Well, this is a mechanical device, no electrical components, and it's simple. It doesn't have any moving parts. And so I just kind of guessing here, I would say we might want to separate out the image of the mug. That might be one figure. We might even separate the handle itself as a figure, and then we might even want to have a third picture of all this beauty put together, our mug. So now we're talking 3 figures, and this is where the tables come in. So why would you want a table with this? Well, one table might describe alternative material to make this out of. One other table might describe alternatives to a mug. So maybe cupping your hands together, maybe using a leaf, maybe using a coconut shell. So tables could be used to describe alternatives, and those become important when the patent office is examining the patent application in a process called prosecution. Something we can talk about later in another video. So going with this real quick example of, say, 3 figures and 1 table, we might estimate that this would be about a $4,000 patent application to prepare. And then when you look at your additional cost, UGG's going to be an independent inventor, so we would tell them to budget $400 for those costs. And all the drawings are simple. And so you're looking at, and I should have said this earlier, this is dollars per page drawings. So your simple drawings might take only 2 pages, and that would include a table. So about 150 bucks there. So our final estimate for that particular project would be $550. When we prepare our quotes, we include the cost of formal paperwork and actually filing the application. So now let's take a moment to look at the other factor that greatly influences the cost of a patent application, and that's where you get it written itself. So earlier I mentioned that these are baseline cost. What we're going to discuss now are the big firm versus a solo practitioner or small firm, and how that influences cost. So when I mentioned baseline cost earlier, I'm talking about for a solo practitioner or a small firm. You notice I have 1/2 and 1/2 here. Specifically, roughly half of the revenue generated by a patent application within a small firm goes to overhead. So that's used to pay a paralegal, office expenses, supplies, electricity, all that other stuff. And about half is viewed by that patent practitioner as their salary. At a large firm, things break down a little bit differently. They actually look at the totality of what they get from the point of view of partners, overhead, and then salary to an associate. So if you go to a big firm, plan on that cost being about 50% higher, because they're considering partners and partners overhead as part of their cost structure. So the application that was originally going to be quoted as a baseline of about 4,000 bucks at a small firm, at a big firm would be about 6,000. A baseline application in the software area that might be complex could be quoted at a small firm for about $10,000. At a big firm, you would expect at least $15,000 as a. Now, there's a third type of organization that's entered into the patent arena in the last decade, and these are marketing organizations. With a marketing organization, these are the guys you see advertising on television and on the internet. When they refer those cases to a solo practitioner or law firm, they typically want to get either a flat fee for that referral or some type of I call it here a marketing override that can be as much as half the cost of the patent application. So for example, if you're paying a marketing organization $6,000 for a patent application, you can pretty much guess that the firm that's really writing that application is going to receive $3,000 to $4,500. So all of this is about cost, but I also want to say a word about quality, and it's that you frequently get what you pay for. One of the standard answers I give when people ask, how much does it cost to get a patent application, is how much does a car cost? There's just too many factors that go into answering that question. And whether it's, are you asking about picking up a, 1999 Hyundai Sonata, or are you talking about taking home a laser red 2017 Ferrari? There's just a lot of factors that go into determining what is a good estimate for that cost. Now, I do want to equip you with one indication of quality so you can look at an application that's prepared for you and understand if you're really being gypped off or if there's something there that's kind of quirky. Or maybe you're getting a really good product and doggone it, patents are hard to read. First, if what you receive back is gibberish and it reads like gibberish and it has incomplete sentences, words that look like they read a Wikipedia article on your topic but not focused on your invention, that's poor quality. And unfortunately, it's common in patent applications. So let's say that we have Uggs mug and we describe it as a ceramic fired combination of this cup and handle, and we even may say the handle has kind of this ear shape to it, and it's about 4 inches tall and it looks like it holds about maybe 12 ounces of liquid. If you get something that's an exact description of what you submitted, then that's a little bit better, but it's not a great patent application yet. Now, a little bit better description of this would cover things like alternative materials, wood, metal, for example. It might also describe alternative handles. So maybe that the cup is ceramic but the handle is wood, or the cup is wood and the handle is metal. So when you look at alternative descriptions, that's one indication that you have a little bit better application. What makes an application better yet is if there is an indication that some thought has been put into how this invention fits in an overall market space. So go meta. Think about how the invention would be sitting on a shelf and sold next to Ugg the Caveman's cup, or next to that coconut shell, and other alternatives that are out there in the market. And in those descriptions, you're going to be looking for distinctions. What makes your idea better, and what are some foreseeable alternatives that may take shape in the future. Every dollar you spend on a patent application today will save you many dollars in the future, many months in the future, and assuming there's an invention to be patented, your patent application will get through the patent office much quicker and with much fewer headaches and at a much lower cost if the patent application is written well up front. So here are a couple of hints. If you go to a patent attorney and you're willing to pay cash for the first 2 or 3 hours of discussion with that patent attorney, you will create a new dynamic in the relationship, because patent attorneys and other patent writers see so many people that come into their office and just try to get free advice for hours and pick their brain. By writing a check up front, you tell them you're serious. You also tell them that you're reliable and will pay. And because of that, you've reduced the level of uncertainty and risk to that patent attorney, and that means that the quote that they give you will reflect that lower risk in the future. The second hit, bring your homework. Do some research on your invention, do some research on the market around your invention, and bring that information with you. It goes to one of these original factors. It makes them more confident that that thing's not going to change. Thank you for your time. I hope this has been helpful. Again, I'm Stephen Thrasher. You can help me out by giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down and leaving a comment below. If you like, head over to the Facebook group, The Invention Factory, and join us there. I've started blogging over there and would love to have you join us. And if you send me a private message to say thank you for waiting all the way to the end, I'll send you a provisional one-pager which will help give you a feel for some of the issues related to provisional applications. And I'll also give you some rules of thumb about what the provisional application should cost relative to a utility application. But I think we've gone long enough today. Thank you so much.